Good afternoon. My name is Shamira Ahmed, and I am the founder and executive director of the Data Economy Policy Hub. Thank you for joining us this afternoon at this official World Circular Economy Forum side event. The aim of this webinar is to have an informal discussion with key experts and thought leaders about the confluence between data-driven tech, such as artificial intelligence, the circular economy, the digital green twin transition, sustainability, and what all this means for public policy reform and overall sustainable economic development in Africa. And just to recap, the theme of this session is on artificial intelligence and the circular economy in Africa, key considerations for a just transition. It's based on the fact that the circular economy model has gained a lot of traction as an alternative to the current take, waste, and dispose linear economy system. And there's also growing hype that there is potential industry-wide applications of AI-based systems for various use cases that can enhance circularity and ultimately forming the pathway to a green digital African twin transition. But our question is, will this be a just green digital transition, and what does it mean for Africa? And with me today are panelists whose expertise includes AI, sustainability, data analytics, and data governance, just to name a few. And I'd like my panelists to introduce yourself briefly and the organization you represent. Starting with you, Angela.
Okay, yep. My name is Angela. I'm a PhD fellow at the University of Otago, and I am researching on the area of AI and sustainability. I'm actually informing a larger, what do we call it, perspective that we call sustainable AI, because the narratives that we have been hearing very much often in the global discourses are about AI for sustainability, AI for this, AI for development, AI for this, but where we start with the sustainable AI. So, and I will unpack that as we go. So I will be talking very much about what AI means, or a transition into AI means to the environmental sustainability and the larger social sustainability in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you. Antonio, please go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us which organization you are representing.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Antonio Ingwani. I'm Mozambican, co-founder of Data for Moz, which is a data-driven platform for natural resource management. Data for Moz main goal is to capitalize the existing and unexplored ecosystem of data in the natural resource sector for better decision making. So our focus is on localized data, real-time data that can support both government, communities, and other stakeholders to troubleshoot many of the challenges that they have, advancing sustainable management of natural resources. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Antonio. I'll get right into the questions. So, can you both talk about one thing needed to develop and encourage more sustainable consumption and production process, such as the circular economy model? And I think this is a key issue, given that there are a lot of contextual issues and a lot of other underlying issues that need to be addressed when we think of having a circular economy model in sub-Saharan Africa. Antonio, would you like to go first?
Yes, indeed. When we talk about circularity in sub-Saharan Africa, we think about many things. How can we effectively implement a circular economy in a very complex setting such as African context? So one of the things that we kind of not looking into carefully is this paradoxal narrative of the rural Africa, in which, on one hand, we see them as the breadbaskets of most of the urban areas in terms of food production and food supply. But on the other hand, those are the areas that or those are the settings that are most affected when it comes to looking into the perspective of this circular economy, with all the challenge that we see in these communities. So those are the communities that are most affected by malnourishment, lack or scarcity of food or quality food. On the other hand, you say they're the ones that are supplying this the food to the main urban areas. So when you look at the trying to figure out or framing circularity, we need to understand why are these paradoxical situations happen in these settings. One critical issues, we have moved and we have we need to rescue the traditional approach that those communities have been using or implementing for long years, such as regenerative agriculture, low tiling farming practices, so that can build this robust and more resilient value chain of food production and consumption across this new trend of circular economy in Africa. On top of that is looking into more inclusive value chain approach, in which women and youth being integrated within this perspective of framing circularity in Africa, but also a key component, which is the essence of food production in Africa, which is the land. Property rights is not being addressed as much when we talk about circularity in Africa. So to make sure that we have a robust system and a frame that can support this new trend of circularity, we need to address issues such as property rights.
Indeed, thank you, Antonio, for a summary of the complex and dynamic issues that are involved with creating circular systems. Angela, what's your take on the challenges and opportunities to encourage circular economy models?
So I think I will take, I really like what Antonio has really highlighted. And I will take another different turn that addresses issues of power. Particularly is, someone said, this guy, what is his name? Graham. He wrote and said that Africans have been left to perform discourses, global discourses. And they have been busy performing that in the areas of technology. While they have, or they could have their own contextualized and situated models of anything, whatever it is that we are talking about. What I would ask, and I would start by in this conversation, is ask ourselves, what is circularity for Africa? Because we are stuck very much into what circularity is defined by what we call the global regimes. But what works for Africa? What works for the people of Africa? What works for that small farmer? In such a way that it is situated in their farm in such a way that they are performing circularity, but in the context of their small farm that they are farming. If I am holding a small company in Africa, an SME, what is circularity for me? Because circularity is not just for agriculture, but also for people who are having companies. What is circularity for them? What is circularity for me as an individual? What is circularity for African countries and all that? And that is where we start talking and engaging discussions of power, because while on one hand, I would call something like, Antonio, correct me if I'm wrong, but seed recycling or using indigenous seed is a form of circularity, right? At the same time, the people who are funding the global models of circularity are at the same time imposing technologies that push Africans to be going back to the shops to buy seed every season. And so there is an interplay of who is controlling what. So what circularity are we performing? Are we performing the circularity out there while at the same time we are losing what we call circularity or circular economy within our context, some practices that we have carried over for a very long time. And so that is just but an example of how we are doing a lot of the global discourses out there, while within our context, we have so much that we can do, so much that we can attend to and transform Africa. And so that is where I want us to start that kind of a discussion, that who is holding the driver's seat in this discussion about circular economy, and what is circular economy for us. And as long as we are performing a discourse out there, which is not working for us in Africa, then there's no just transition for circular economy, or whichever model we want to talk about. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Very interesting insights and things to think about. And I think you've captured the confluence between human rights, climate and environmental injustice, and the colonial and historic context and the inequalities in a lot of industrialization and multilateral value chains, essentially. Can you tell me more how digital rights, climate and environmental justice become more complex as we seek just data or a green digital twin transition with data-driven tech such as AI, and how we can reframe leveraging data-driven tech such as AI to guarantee a just transition in Africa within all the contextual issues that you mentioned?
Oh, that question comes to me?
Yes, Angela. What does AI mean? If in the how do we use AI for sustainability? And I think that you mentioned that you are a specialist and it's part of your PhD research on how AI interacts with sustainability during all the complex contexts that you highlighted.
Yeah, could I share some slides just to highlight a few things?
Yes, sure, go ahead.
Host disabled screen sharing.
Okay, there we go. Can you share your screen?
Yes. So I hope you can see those slides.
Yes.
So I just wanted to bring to light some of these, trying to reduce that I don't. Yes, so I wanted to first highlight some of these things before we talk about what a just transition may look like for Africa. And this is just part of the literature and data that I've gone through as I go through my studies. So these are statistics from US and other places where AI is being implemented. The first point here shows the key highlights about AI technologies. That data centers in US alone require approximately 1.7 billion liters per day of water, potable water, that is water that can be used. Keep that one in mind, that is an highlight. The other highlight is about all technologies that are going to power AI or that are powering AI now. Particularly transistors are becoming smaller and smaller to a point that actually someone said that they have overtaken the Moore's law. They are causing a challenge of being disposed. The third highlight that I want us to have in mind is AI and robotics that power AI will require lithium batteries, especially where it is going to be required in the farms, agriculture, and all that. So they'll require lithium batteries for energy storage, and disposability is also another issue. And the fourth highlight that I want us to look at and to keep in mind is there lacks national and global standards and practices for disposing e-waste. And statistics show that most e-waste go to the global south, or what I call the global majority, who are the ones who are tasked or given the cost of disposing e-waste. Now, this one is a major highlight, which is from a research that was done by a lady called Emma Strample and our colleagues. It highlights a few issues about what a normal carbon emission is, because I want us to talk about sustainability after this, what it means, what AI means. So air travel, a passenger in air travel emits 1984 carbon, lbs of carbon or pounds, I think they should be pounds. A human life per year emits that amount, 11,023 pounds. An American life average per year emits 36,156, and an American car in its lifetime emits 126,000 pounds. But let's see what is emitted by training one model, one AI model. NLP pipeline emits 39. Experimentation alone emits 78, 468. The transformer, which is big, it emits 192. And the W neural architecture search emits 365, 326, 155 pounds of carbon dioxide. That is training a model. That is a large model of AI. Now, what does that mean? That while an average American life emits 36,165 carbon, and an American car emits 126, training one large model emits 365,155 pounds of carbon dioxide, which is over 18 times of carbon an average American emits per year, and over 5 times average of American car emits in its lifetime. So that is telling you how much carbon emission comes from AI. And just to escalate this further, this graph here is showing how the evolution of training of AI has been increasing. And you can see, like in 2020, we are having so many trainings happening. Actually, AI training as grants have increased by 300,000 times over the last between 2010 and 2020 alone. Now, the last slide, which I will highlight something, is all this training is happening within data centers, within wires, invisible wires that we cannot see. But deep down, everything ends up in a data center. The water that we talked about, it's in a data center. But where are the data centers found? Let's look at the statistics. Africa alone hosts only 14 data centers, 12 in South Africa, 1 in Nigeria, 1 in Tanzania. North America, where US is, it hosts the highest number, which is 1192, and 1106 of these are based in US alone. South America 48, Asia Pacific 120, Asia 452, not the countries that are hosting the biggest number. China has 374. Europe has 392, but UK within the European region has 324. Then the Middle East 36, Russia, there's no data. Now, let me stop sharing or I'll lower this. What does that mean? Okay. I'm trying to enlarge the screen. What does this mean for Africa? When you look at this data, there is AI, hidden behind AI is very large carbon emissions that no one is talking about. And the carbon emissions are happening within data centers when we are running the training. Whenever we are running the training, whether we are doing it in Africa, whether we are doing it in US, whether we are doing wherever, every data ends up in a data center somewhere and carbon emission happens. And that carbon emission, when it happens, it contributes to what we are calling global warming today. And that is just one section of it on top of what I talked about, the e-waste that mostly ends up in Africa and the other parts of the global south. We're also talking about the extraction of rare metals, which I don't even think I highlighted that, where most of those ones are being extracted in Africa and other developing countries. Zambia is one of the contributors of some of the parts that are going to be contributing in building parts of this AI. Now, when we look at this, who is paying the cost? That is a question I want to ask. Who is paying the cost of the environmental, the environmental cost that comes with AI? Because from what we look at, the people with the highest numbers of data centers are technically the highest contributors of carbon emission that is coming from AI. But who are the recipients of it? Most developing countries. They are the ones that are recipients of all the ones who are paying the cost of AI, carbon emission, and anything climate change that is related to that. Now, some of this information is not out there. It's actually gatekept in what we call journals. And no the layman has no access to this information. And this information can be sifted, but what we are talking about, the discussions that I'm hearing a lot in Africa is we want AI for development, AI for this, AI for sustainability. And all we are talking about is what AI can do to solve sustainability. But we are not talking about how can we design AI in such a way that it is sustainable. It is not going to contribute or to reproduce the same problems that we are trying to solve. Because AI, in this case, is in itself contributing to a very high level of environmental cost. If AI can contribute to what an American 5 times of what at the lifetime emission done by an American car, then I think that is a questionable thing that we need to start talking about. And those are the issues that I'm actually raising about the just transition, the environmentally just transition of AI. When we are hearing, and a lot of funding, I'm sorry to say, a lot of funding is being channeled to AI for development, AI for gender inclusion. We are being told, please keep inventing, keep training the models, keep training them and sending the data to the data centers, and we keep emitting. We're not being told how can we design that in a sustainable way so that they are not emitting that high amount of carbon. And how can we make sure that the people that we're extracting rare metals from, their lands, we can treat them as custodians of the way people here are treating their lands as custodians of their lands. Are the lands there, people being treated the same way? Are we taking care of issues like child labor and wars that are being instigated in places where mining of such rare metals are happening? That is just one of it. How about the e-waste that is being brought in Africa? After everything has been used, we are the ones who end up paying the cost. We give out the rare metals, then they process the computers, they process the wires, they process everything, they process the transistors, and the transistors are used and everything is dumped back for us to pay the cost of waste management, of which we do not even have working waste management systems. And for me, those are some of the struggles I'm having with what we are calling a transition, a technological transition for Africa, because we seem to be caught up in a discourse that does not even take care of us. Who are developing, who owns the data centers in Africa? That's another question. I was checking just who owns what. Most of the data centers in South Africa are owned by companies in the West. The data center in Tanzania is owned by a company, is it a US company? The data center in Nigeria, I don't know whether it's owned by a European company, but most of those data centers are owned by the West. On top of that, all the designs of the algorithms and those AI, who has designed them? They have been designed out here, they are being implemented in Africa. They are carrying all the biases, neo-colonial biases. Some of them have been said, like one being implemented in South Africa for, what do we call it? Facial surveillance. It is actually discriminating, it's actually reproducing the neo-colonial norms, where it can actually spot a normal African behavior as a behavior that can be flagged as abnormal. And so those are some of the issues that I'm wondering whether, as we think about it, as we talk about AI, and actually I hated a statement that was written somewhere where China is being told to be experimenting. I hate the words experimenting, because experimenting, we are guinea pigs where people are experimenting algorithms on the African soil so that they can capture the data of Black, but who designed this algorithm? Who designed that technology? What biases do they carry? Because we say that technology is designed by a human being who carries social biases. And those social biases are ingrained in those technologies. And that's why in US, technologies are being said to be able to discriminate the Black Americans. Why? Because they are dominantly, who are developing, people who are developing them are dominantly white. So we need to start those discussions and talking about, and just not just being recipients of technology and taking them in as global truths, but starting to ask questions about what does this mean for us? Are we actually supporting things that are going to entrench the same things, that the same issues that we are trying to address, whether social, environmental, or economic? Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Very sobering statistics, and you unpacked a lot of multidimensional issues when it comes to leveraging technology to change existing structural dynamics that are persistent and have overlapping challenges in the way social technological impacts of AI, data justice, climate justice, and historical context all overlap in ecosystems that, for example, have less AI maturity, such as Africa, and even in other ecosystems in the global north, there are similar challenges. The lack of disaggregated data, since climate change and environmental justice is not gender neutral, there are issues concerning power and land rights and so many other things that you mentioned over and above the AI-related issues. And I'd just like to ask Antonio, given your experience with creating data in natural resource management, can you tell us more about your struggles and how those interplays come into the scene when we are speaking about AI and natural resource management and data-driven systems?
Yeah, thank you, Samira. I think, Angela touched on, very crucial, she touched crucial issues, when talking about AI and advancing, these modern technologies in Africa. And, she well put it that, that we are lacking this context specific approach. We are drawn in these, narratives of using prox models based on, settings that are do not reflect, what Africa is itself. And in particular, in tying this to, my area of expertise and where we are working, which is natural resource, where, everyone is talking about sustainability today and, climate change. We are looking at natural resource management as, is the pathway, to reduce or curb, the emissions, carbon emissions globally. And Africa plays a huge role in this process. So how can we capitalize that and perhaps have a role in this setting, playing a big role in this setting of discussing sustainable development globally. And that's where data comes from, and first is good data, and that the relevance of that data. Those are the main challenge. For many years, we have been recipients of these vast investments and development. Data has been generated, collected, and today you go back, you want to look at this data, does not exist. And on top of that is that this data, I mean, the process, of transferring that capacity locally did not happen, or if it happened, was not done properly. So that's why when you still go back to, to our normal institutions in Africa, you still don't have that capacity needed to generate that, precise, relevant data that can be used to model those, AI models that can be used to solve problems in various settings in Africa. I'm working particularly on sectors such as agriculture and small scale fisheries and carbon credits. And one of the problems, particularly in agriculture, is that we lack that localized data that's more needed, to help our policymakers or even, our scientists, to develop those, approach that are action at that level and that can promote change. When I say that, what I'm saying with that is that they've been all along the lines of been this narrative that, rural Africa is homogeneous. We don't pay attention to those, let's say, there's critical difference within those communities. And those can be captured if we deploy a good tools that can collect that data, and can be captured if we ask the relevant questions that can enable us, to look, from a different perspective rather than what we've been forced to look into, which is, rural Africa looks the same. If you're in rural Africa in Mozambique, the profile of the small farmer of, an individual citizen in rural Mozambique will be the same in South Africa. They're not the same. Even within one community, the profile of those smaller farmers is different. So we need to be able to generate data that looks in those specificities and address issues that are very contextualized, and that can be used, and this data can be used to model those actions that we need to promote change at that level. So quality of data, it's a problem, but I'll not say it's a problem because there's no there's no willing out there to generate that. There's so many issues or challenges surrounding that, and one of them is infrastructure. We don't have those capable infrastructure that can accommodate the tons of massive data that we can generate in those settings. We don't have this technical capacity of expertise, people with these data analytics, data-driven tools that can use that data to generate insights that are useful for the policymakers or even for the communities. And also, I think, and lastly, is that the broader commitment from our government to look at data as an asset rather than see that as something that will play against them. I think those are the main challenges that we face when we talk about promoting this data-driven and analytic approach to solve problems of sustainability issues in Africa. And again, emphasizing that these last item, which is the willingness of the government and authorities to promote even more the use of data. It's critical. So how do we do that? Because this ties into lots of political power and social issues that are very, very difficult to deal with.
Thank you, Antonio. You've captured on a lot of issues that involve the multidimensional aspects of data. So beyond data justice and data ethics and AI ethics that's commonly discussed at the global stage, data is also important for policymaking, and we need to have a balance between protecting data privacy and digital rights and using data to inform contextual fit for purpose policies and to enhance policymaking. So there needs to be that balance. So even in African countries, I think the key thing you highlighted is that there are silos in the way people, or the way governments or communities govern data and how people are represented or misrepresented in data. And the digital divide also exacerbates a lot of these issues. So while it's not all gloom and doom, and it seems like there's all gloom and doom, can you please discuss the opportunities that we can have from AI and circularity? Maybe just one, Antonia.
Before we go there, could I add something to what Antonio just concluded? Because I feel like it would seal the deal if I added this to what he said, when he says that there's generally lack of data and a lack of commitment from our governments to ensure that we have infrastructure for that opportunity of data to be there. Two, we need trained people skills around that and all that. And that is a missing space that I want to add that is being explored by the multinationals, the capitalists. And Africa now has become a market for technology. And that's why everyone is rushing there, because they want to market their technology. And this is where now we find all these social inequalities being reproduced again, because if we do not have our own who can actually design technologies that captures the values and the needs of the Africans, then we are going to buy technology from elsewhere that represents other people's values, and those values are going to come there and reproduce the issues that we are trying to address. One, so Africa has become a market for people to come experiment, people to come try their technology, and after trying their technology, sell their technology to the African countries, because the African countries are not investing in their own technology, which serves their own people. Let me give an example of an African technology that I know the globe has wowed Africa for it. Mobile money, fintech. Africa is a leader of fintech now, of mobile money particularly. The M-Pesa started in Kenya. It's something that technically, and I think you use everywhere in Africa now, something like M-Pesa, that can technically use every form of phone in Africa, including the poorest person in the rural Africa, can actually access mobile money using the non-digital phones. That is a technology that is designed by Africans for Africa to address African needs. That's why most people who are using mobile money are banked, can actually be able to bank their money in their little phones. And they can actually be able to transact and withdraw money or send money, transfer, or even buy farm inputs from wherever they are in their rural areas, because they can access that. But when we are getting technology that is designed in China, Australia, US, that technology has no business to do with my village, because my village will never understand that drone that is whose algorithm is designed in the US and in the context of US. So I believe that that is what has been reproduced, that the global market, and I also blame them because they are taking advantage of the fact that there's a lack of goodwill. The global market has made Africa a marketplace for all forms of technology, and they come in all forms, including donations, whatever it is that they are doing. The other part is that they have converted the aspect of data. It has become more extractive, more than, how do I put it? You're picking our data, how you use it, how you produce it, how you disseminate it. You do not have control of it. So in short, you are extracting. I told you, I read an article where it is in one of the business reviews saying that China is experimenting their algorithms and their technologies, their AI technologies in Zimbabwe, particularly, and all that. And I felt like, my goodness, sounds so extractive. So you come and extract the data using your algorithm, and whatever it interpreted, I mean, we are not in control of what is happening with the data out there and all that. And how that is going to be converted and how it's going to be used, it's still the people who own the technology control that part of it. So I guess also, as we talk about data, we also need to talk about what is the role of those who are coming to Africa to commercialize their technology. What is their role in also this whole drama about data?
Yes, indeed, there are a lot of overlaps with data justice, algorithmic governance, and who is represented in the data. So it is quite a sobering talk, but I think these discussions are necessary if we're talking about having a just digital green transition. We can't focus on issues that don't consider the actual contextual realities and historical challenges and legacies that have essentially brought us to this point. And also power dynamics are very important. The lack of data, representation in data, lack of human capital, infrastructure issues. There are a lot of overlapping issues that both you, Antonio, and Angela have highlighted. And essentially, we need an unsiloed approach to address all of these issues. So inequality, human rights, data justice, digital rights, environmental sustainability are more or less one thing. We need to have more holistic and coordinated policymaking with different actors at a national, global, and regional level when it comes to understanding how technology impacts sustainability efforts and the techno-social issues that come with technology and innovative developments. We have a few minutes. I don't know if anyone has any last words. Antonio, would you like to go first?
Yeah. Well, I mean, just three things that we should consider when talking about scaling up circularity and AI in Africa. One is if we want to play a role in this global discussion, we need to expand our digital infrastructure. This is key. We're talking about massive volumes of data. We need We need to establish infrastructure that can accommodate that. Second is produce that data, that looks like Africa, data that is specific, context specific, data that can be used to solve problems of those people sitting there in Africa. And I think lastly is technical capacity. Yes, we're talking about data, we're talking about this digital transformation, digital transition. In fact, we don't have technical capacity in most of the African countries, to manage, and discuss totally digital transition, AI. So we need to invest in that. We need to, to promote and foster the collaboration between, government, policymakers, scientists, all across Africa and the globe, to be able to build that capacity in country. So those are my takeaways.
Angela, thank you, Antonio. Angela, any last words?
I think just to add on what Antonio said, because I don't want to dilute what he said by repeating that, but I would request our governments to stop. I mean it's high time we moved from how do I say it? At this an equal power relation kind of whatever discussions when it comes to technology. For me, technology is one of the worst tools that can actually entrench the deepest power inequalities that it can, because most of its activity and most of its things are power issues are hidden and are subtle. We actually say they are hidden behind those wires. Behind those wires are deep power issue, and it is a power tool in itself. So it depends with how we approach these issues of technology critically and start thinking that it's either we are negotiating our space in this AI regime, or we are letting go and we are going to go deeper into some higher level of technological colonialism. And that would be the worst than any colonialism that has ever been. Because when it is within the wires, it is invisible. And when it is invisible, you cannot control it. So that is what I would say.
Thank you, Angela. And thank you for joining us on this panel. My last words are that given that there is very limited information on artificial intelligence for circularity in Africa, I think there was a need to create a networking space for connecting and showcasing diverse voices and projects at the intersections of AI and the circular economy. And so I'd like to take this opportunity to also present the official launch of the Artificial Intelligence for Circularity Exchange, where we can have diverse and open discussions about circularity in the context of artificial intelligence and what we need to improve, what projects are happening, and how we can leverage artificial intelligence. And we also need to, as highlighted in this panel, understand the risks that come with using technology for circular economy progress. And thank you so much for your time. The recording will be made available, and enjoy the rest of your day. Angela, I know it's very late for you, or very early. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Antonio.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yeah. Bye, Antonio. Let's catch up.
Yeah.